So next up, we get to talk about one of my favorite CSS properties, transitions. Really, it's more than one property, in the same way that border is more than one property, even though there is a single border property you can use as a shorthand. So transitions allow us to animate the transition of one property value to another property value. I'll show you a very simple example to start. I'm in a new document, empty, nothing very exciting to see in here. There's some content in here that I'll come back to. I'm ignoring it for now. I'll just comment it out. And I'm going to add in, how about a div with a class of circle. I'm going to style it as a circle. Okay? And let's see, I'm going to leave it completely empty. Then in my app.css, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here too. I'm going to comment that all out. I'll explain why it's here momentarily. But I'm going to begin by just styling that circle div to have a width of, 300 pixels, a height of 300 pixels, and a color, or background color rather, of, magenta. Okay, there it is. Now I did say it has a class of circle, so let's actually make it a circle. Border radius, 50%. And now we have a beautiful circle. Okay, now when I hover over this circle, I'm going to change the color to be cyan. See if that works. Okay, that works great. I'm also going to, maybe I won't have it be a circle now, but when I hover, I will have it be a circle. Like that. Okay? So, no transitions involved at the moment. We have multiple properties that are changing on the page, or on this one element, right? The background color and border radius, but it's an immediate, like a switch, right? It's flickering between them. It's not very graceful. But I can transition them. I can say that I want the color and the border radius to take 1 full second to change. So don't just flip immediately, but take a full second to fade between. And to do that, I can set transition to be 1 second, just like that. 1s. And now as I hover, ooh, look at that. So that's 1 second, right? I can do like 3 seconds if I want to. Okay, very slow. But you can see that both of those properties, or if I had other things that were changing, they would all be animated. That transition would be animated. Now, it's not always just hovering. That's a very common example, but in JavaScript, you'll often apply classes or remove classes and change styles on the fly, and you can still apply transitions to that. So it's not just about, when you hover over something and switch from one CSS property to another property. There are other situations. But for now, this is the easiest way for me to demonstrate. So that's a very, very simple example, setting everything to transition for 3 seconds. But the syntax actually goes a lot further than that. I can specify a specific property name, how long I want that one property to take to transition, a delay, and then the most confusing part when you're beginning, a timing function. So why don't we start by just singling out property name. So instead of saying 3 seconds for everything, which is what I'm actually saying here, if there were other properties changing, they would all be animated during that transition. I can single out background color, just like that. And now only the background color will take 3 seconds. You can see the border radius changes immediately. So, you probably don't want that, but we can single them out. I also can do things like specify a delay. So let's see, I want a 1 second delay. So now when I hover, it's going to take 1 second before that transition even begins. It's kind of hard to see because of how slow the whole thing is. But if I make this a 1 second transition and it takes 1 second before anything happens, so I hover, nothing, there we go. Okay, nothing, and then 1 second. It goes both directions. 1 second wait, 1 second change. 1 second wait, 1 second change. Now we're just talking about background color. If you want all properties, you can also just specify all like that. And now the same thing will happen. 1 second of nothing, and then 1 second, both properties change. All right, so that's the basic idea of transition. I'm just gonna go back to background color. I can also specify different transitions for each one. So background color could take 1 second and border radius can take 2 seconds. And you'll see first 1 second of color, it finishes before the border radius finishes. It's a bit hard to pay attention to, but hopefully you can see that. This thing will be fully cyan before it's a circle. Okay, now there is this third thing that we can specify, which is a timing function. And to illustrate that, I actually have a demo I've already pre-made just to save some time. So I've got these sections here, or one section rather, with 4 divs. And I'm just going to add some styling in here really quickly. Okay, so I added some styling in here. They each just are a turquoise 100 by 100 square. And they have a transition on their margin left, which typically we don't actually animate. In the next video, I'm going to show you a better property, a more performant property to animate to move things around. But you will see that when I hover over this section, every div is going to have a new margin left of 500 pixels. So they end up moving 500 pixels to the right. And I give them a transition on that margin left, 3 full seconds. Okay? So right now, there's nothing different than what we've talked about, right? It's a single property, a duration. But I mentioned we would cover this timing function. So when we specify a transition, there are many ways. If we have 3 seconds, let's say, there are many ways to go from red to blue in 3 seconds. Do we just go evenly, just, in a line as smooth as possible? Or do we start really quickly and then slow down at the end? There's a whole set of these transition timing functions that are built in. They have names like ease in, ease out, linear, cubic, Bezier curves, lots of different options, but they all specify, actually I think it'll be easiest to show you here. This is a linear transformation, or transition rather, where it's just happening smoothly. It never speeds up or slows down. It's just going in a straight line. Here's one called ease in. So in ease in, you'll see that it starts out slow and then it speeds up. It's easing into it. This is called steps. So we get 6 steps in this case. And then here's a cubic Bezier curve. Can you see that? It sort of goes forward and backwards. All of these take the same amount of time to go from the beginning to the end, but they get there in a very different way. So I'll show that here. I have 4 squares, 4 divs. They look exactly the same, but then I give them each a different transition timing function. So I could specify, all the same, just transition, margin left, 3 seconds, ease in, but that defeats the purpose. I want them to have a separate timing function. So I'm using the named property, transition timing function. Just like I can set, border for everything at once, like I can do 2 pixels solid red, but I also have, border color that I can set separately, or border style. I'm doing the same thing. So I'm giving them all a 3-second transition on margin left, but then individually assigning them a timing function. Okay, so let's see what that looks like now. Here we go. Look at that, very different, but pay attention at the end. They all get to the same spot at the end at the exact same time. So a very different journey. This one takes forever to get started here. But when it does, it speeds way up versus, what else do we have? The first one is ease in, the second one is ease out. So you'll see this first one starts off slow and then speeds up pretty good. The second one starts off quickly and then slows down. It eases out. And then the bottom 2 are cubic Bezier curves that I found online. I didn't type this out myself. There are websites like this one here, which is easings.net. And this just demonstrates, it shows a chart, a diagram of a timing function, but it also allows you to see it in action when you hover. That little bar, or this little thing on the right-hand side is being animated. So if we start with an obvious one, here's an ease in, you can see, versus something like this, where we get a big bounce in the middle. Or here's ease in exponential. It starts slowly and then really speeds up. You can click on one and then just copy that curve there if that's what you want to use. So this is just a very quick intro to timing functions and to transitions. But just to summarize how it works, there are 4 things that we can specify. A property that we want to animate, a duration. That can be in seconds. It could also be in milliseconds, but usually I prefer 0.5 seconds personally instead of 500 milliseconds. They're the same thing, obviously. We also then, after that, we can specify a timing function, which I'm not doing here, but I could do ease in as an example. And then after that, a delay if I want a delay. The default is no delay. So You probably won't notice this ease in on the background color, but I can try it. So this background color should start slowly. Well, I guess you can see it. It starts changing slowly and then speeds up. It's a little hard to tell. It's a lot easier to see the timing functions in an example like this. So that's why I did it. And that's it for transitions. Very, very useful, especially commonly used with hover effects to make nice little transitions from one state, a button not being hovered, to the second state, which is a button being hovered. Often we call attention to the buttons that are being hovered or selected, and we'll probably do a little demo of that in the next video, just a quick little button that we'll build together. Actually, 2 more videos from now, I'm going to cover transforms next. Anyway, as transitions, you'll see them come up here and again. The one last thing I would mention is definitely single out the properties you want to transition. Don't just do transition all, because eventually you'll make some changes to your code. You'll update something in your hover CSS, and suddenly you end up with transitions you're not anticipating, you're not expecting. So even if these are the only 2 things right now, and I want to say just transition everything that changes, what if down the line something else is added in here and I don't want it to transition? That's why it's better to single out the properties you want rather than just being lazy and saying transition all. Okay.